Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. I want to show you guys today I got my new Jerusalem Bible, and this came today, and I ordered it from Amazon. It was like 38 bucks, and it comes with a little box to keep it in, so you could travel around with it and not get it all messed up. It has a leather binding, gold gilded pages, and the tiniest writing ever. And this actually contains the Old Testament, the Apocrypha, and the New Testament as well. So pretty cool, huh? But it's written, I'd say, in a more simplistic kind of way. So we were started on Maccabees, first Maccabees. So we'd be in chapter 2 of Maccabees, first Maccabees, where Esdras was one Esdras, two Esdras. Maccabees is first Maccabees and second Maccabees. So I'm just trying to find it here. And in this Bible, it is actually in the order that it should be. Whereas in the 1611 Bible, that one, the books that weren't included in the Standard Bible are actually listed in the 1611, but they're not intermixed with the rest of the scriptures. They're in something called the Apocrypha, separated from the scriptures. So I may need my glasses and my magnifying glass to read this tiny little print. Let me see. Okay. Well, here it gives us an overview of the first book of Maccabees, and it says, the two books of Maccabees record the fierce struggle of Judaism to resist absorption into the Hellenistic world from 167 to 151 BC, and that would be before Christ's birth. The kings of Syria, tempting to unify their empire, profited from factions within Judaism to try to stamp out the Jewish way of life. Elsewhere, this attempt to impose a Greek-style religion and culture was universally successful, and Judaism might well have perished with other local religions and cultures. But the attempt produced a furious opposition from all those faithful to the Jewish law. The opposition was led by Matthias and his sons, a priestly family from a small village on the coastal plain, who soon became known as the Maccabees, or Hammerers. That's Hammers. They set about their task with a reckless courage and faith in the unfailing help of their God. It soon became clear to the champions of the law that political independence was a necessary condition of religious freedom. Sounds like something today, huh? Well, I think we may learn something about our Christian fortitude. The story of the 40-year struggle to establish this independence is the theme of the first Maccabees. The author writes with a winning admiration for his heroes and an uncompromising commitment to his Jewish values. The account was written in Hebrew, probably about 100 BC, but exists now only in a Greek version, which I think is the Septuagint. There is a good deal of overlap with Second Maccabees, which covers part of the same period from a different angle. Dates in the First and Second Maccabees are reckoned from 312 BC, the year of the foundation of Antioch. All right, so here we are in what should be chapter 2, because I've already read chapter 1. But you know what? We're going to read it from this book, so let's just do chapter 1 again. I, Alexander, of Macedon, son of Philip, had come from the land of Kittim, and defeated Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, whom he succeeded as ruler at first of Hellas. He undertook many campaigns, gained possession of many fortresses, and put the local kings to death. So he advanced to the ends of the earth, plundering nation after nation. The earth grew silent before him, and his ambitious heart swelled with pride. Now we know that pride will get you. Pride got Satan. Pride got Sodom. Let's see. He assembled very powerful forces and subdued provinces, nations, and princes, and they became his tributaries. But the time came when Alexander took to his bed, in the knowledge that he was dying. He summoned his officers, noblemen who had been brought up with him from his youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. Alexander had reigned 12 years when he died. Each of his officers established himself in his own region. All assumed crowns after his death, they and their heirs after them for many years, bringing increasing evils on the world. One second. Yeah, I kind of want to bring this part together. And if we go back to Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the giant statue with the head of gold and the chest of silver, and let's read this right here. I just want to show how the Bible really is interknitted. There's like a beautiful thread running through the whole thing. And so Nebuchadnezzar has had the dream, and of course Daniel is going to interpret it. You have had, this is 2 Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. You have had a vision, your majesty. This is what you saw. A statue, a great statue with extreme brightness, stood before you, terrible to see. The head of this statue was of fine gold. Its chest and arms were of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet part iron and part clay. While you were gazing, a stone broke away, untouched by any hand, and struck the statue, struck its feet of iron and clay, and shattered them. Then the iron and clay, bronze, silver, and gold all broke into pieces as fine as chaff on the threshing floor in summer. The wind blew them away, leaving not a trace behind, and the stone that had struck the statue grew into a great mountain, filling the whole earth. This was the dream. We shall now explain to you, to the king, what it means. You, your majesty, King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. Human beings, wild animals, birds of the air, wherever they live, he has entrusted to your rule, making you king of them all. You are the golden head. And after you, another kingdom will rise, not as great as yours, and then a third of bronze, which will rule the whole earth. There will be a fourth kingdom, hard as iron that pulverizes and crushes all, like iron that breaks everything to pieces. It will crush and break all the earlier kingdoms. The feet you saw, part of earthenware, part of iron, are a kingdom which will be split in two, but which will retain something of the strength of iron, just as you saw the iron and the clay of the earthenware mixed together. The feet were part of iron, part potter's clay. The kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron and the clay of the earthenware mixed together, so the two will be mixed together in human seed. But they will not hold together any more than iron will blend with clay. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and this kingdom will not pass into hands of another race. It will shatter and absorb all the previous kingdoms and itself last forever. Just as you saw a stone untouched by hand break away from the mountain and reduce iron, bronze, earthenware, silver, and gold to powder, the great God has shown the king what is to take place. The dream is true and the interpretation exact. So we know that Nebuchadnezzar was the head of the gold, and that was in Babylon. But then the power went to the Medes and the Persians, and that was the silver chest. Now we are seeing, now we are seeing, bronze. And this is the reign of Alexander the Great. And then, the legs of iron will be the Roman Empire. So here, let's continue reading in First Maccabees. Let me see where I was. Okay. And so his empire, Alexander the Great, was broken into 4 different parts. He has 4 friends, and so they each got a part of it, and all of them went from evil to more evil. So Antioch Epiphanes, Israel infected with Hellenism. That would be Hellenes, the Greek goddess. From these there grew a wicked offshoot, Antioch Epiphanes, son of King Antioch. Once a hostage in Rome, he became king in the 107th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. It was then that there emerged from Israel a set of renegades who led many people astray. Come, they said, let us ally ourselves with the Gentiles surrounding us, for since we are separated ourselves from them, many misfortunes have overtaken us. This proposal proved acceptable, and a number of the people eagerly approached the king, who authorized them to practice the Gentiles' observances. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, such as the Gentiles have, disguised their circumcision, and abandoned the Holy Covenant, submitting to Gentile rule as willing slaves of impiety. First Egyptian campaign and pillage of the temple. Once Antioch had seen his authority established, he determined to make himself king of Egypt and the ruler of both kingdoms. He invaded Egypt in massive strength with chariots and elephants and cavalry and a large fleet. He engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned back and fled before his advance, leaving many casualties. And Ptolemy is spelled with a P, like as if you spelled pneumonia, but the P is silent. And led before his advance, leaving many casualties. The fortified cities of Egypt were captured, and Antioch plundered the country. After his conquest of Egypt in the year 143. Now, you know that before Christ, the years that mark the time on a calendar are decreasing as it gets closer to the time of Christ's birth. So, let's see. So, in the year 143, Antioch turned about and advanced on Israel and Jerusalem in massive strength. So, 143 years before Christ was born, this was taking place. In solemnity, breaking into the sanctuary, he removed the golden altar and the lampstand for the light with all its fittings, together with the table for the loaves of permanent offering, the libation vessels, the cups, the golden censers, the veil, the crowns, and the golden decoration on the front of the temple, which he stripped of everything. He made off with the silver and gold and precious vessels. He discovered the secret treasures and seized them, and removing all these, he went back to his own country, having shed much blood and uttered words of extreme arrogance. There was deep mourning for Israel throughout the country. Rulers and elders groaned. Girls and young men wasted away. The women's beauty suffered a change. Every bridegroom took up a dirge. The bride sat grief-stricken on her marriage bed. The earth quaked because of its inhabitants, and the whole house of Jacob was clothed with shame. Invention of the Maes Arch and construction of the Acra. 2 years later, the king sent to Maarch through the cities of Judah. He came to Jerusalem with an impressive force, and addressing them with what appeared to be peaceful words, he gained their confidence. Then suddenly he fell on the city, dealing it a terrible blow and destroying many of the people of Israel. He pillaged the city and set it on fire, tore down its houses and encircling wall, took the women and children captive, and commandeered the cattle. They rebuilt the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and made this their citadel. There they installed a brood of sinners, of renegades, who fortified themselves inside it, storing arms and provisions, and depositing there the loot they had collected from Jerusalem. They were to prove a great trouble. It became an ambush for the sanctuary, an evil adversary for Israel at all times. They shed innocent blood all around the sanctuary and defiled the sanctuary itself. The cities of Jerusalem fled because of them. She became a dwelling place of strangers, estranged from her own offspring. Her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became as forsaken as a desert. Her feasts were turned into mournings, her Sabbaths into a mockery, her honor into reproach, her dishonor now fully matched her former glory. Her greatness was turned into grief. Now we have the installation of Gentile cults. The king then issued a proclamation to his whole kingdom that all were to become a single people. New World Order? Sounds like it. Watch, listen. Each nation renouncing its particular customs. All the Gentiles conformed to the king's decree, and many Israelites chose to accept his religion, sacrificing to idols and profaning the Sabbath. The king also sent edicts by messenger to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah, directing them to adopt customs foreign to the country, banning burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations from the sanctuary, profaning Sabbaths and feasts, defiling the sanctuary and everything holy, building altars, shrines, and temples for idols, sacrificing pigs and unclean beasts, leaving their sons uncircumcised, and prostituting themselves to all kinds of impurity and abomination, so that they should forget the law and revoke all observance of it. Anyone not obeying the king's commandment was to be put to death. Writing in such terms to every part of his kingdom, the king appointed inspectors for the whole people and directed all the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice city by city. Many of the people, that is, every apostate from the law, rallied to them and so committed evil in the country, forcing Israel into hiding in any possible place of refuge. On the 15th day of Shevlev, in the year 145, the king built the appalling abomination on top of the altar of burnt offering. And altars were built in the surrounding towns of Judah, and incense offered at the doors of houses and in the streets. Many books of the law that came to light were torn up and burned. Whenever anyone was discovered possessing a copy of the covenant or practicing the law, the king's decree sentenced him to death. Month after month, they took harsh action against any offenders they discovered in the towns of Israel. On the 25th day of each month, sacrifice was offered on the altar erected on the top of the altar of burnt offering. Women who had had their children circumcised were put to death, according to the edict, with their babies hung round about their necks. And the members of their households and those who had performed the circumcision were executed with them. Yet there was many in Israel who stood firm and took the courage to refuse unclean food. They chose death rather than contamination by such fair or profanation of the Holy Covenant, and they were executed. It was a truly dreadful retribution that visited Israel. And we can see a lot of similarities and expect, I think, here looking at 1 Maccabees chapter 1, it sounds an awful lot like what is coming upon us in the end times. And as Solomon wisely once said, there is nothing new under the sun. Everything that was will be again. So I'm going to just mark this and We'll read Second Maccabees tomorrow. And as always, is God willing? I love you. Not God willing that I love you, but if God's willing, we'll read Second Maccabees. And I love you.